Thanks. So I've got 5 minutes or less between this and booze. So I'll try to do this in 5 seconds. Um, uh, on my name tag is Revel Partners. Revel Partners is a New York City-based ad tech focused venture firm that does early expansion stage venture in a very small $30 billion industry. Doesn't apply to probably 95% of you. So I'm not going to spend much time talking about that. I started my career as a software developer. I worked for a little company called Avalanche Systems, which I was the first guy writing code there, and the company was eventually acquired by Razorfish in Razorfish's first acquisition as part of its roll-up. Here in New York City, down at 304 Hudson Street. During that, I realized I was a terrible coder. I could do it, but not very well. And what I was much better at was dealing with clients and helping connect people. So I launched an Avalanche competitor with two friends, both coders. I let them do the coding and I did the sales. And we built that business to 12 employees and had clients like Ford Motor Company, Chase Manhattan Bank, and a variety of others. We were basically 20-year-old punks who were undercutting the competition because anything was better than making $10 to $20 an hour working at Applebee's. We sold the company in December 98, and I went to work for a client. I worked for Ford for 13 months, the most fascinating and painful 13 months of my life. In 1999, Ford was still using an email mainframe system called Profs. Many of you may remember most companies were using Outlook and Exchange. So the auto industry was ripe for disruption, still is. I couldn't last there as a technologist and ended up joining a venture firm to do Latin American venture. We focused on Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico and wrote $1 to $2 million checks in early stage companies. I learned something really interesting as part of that, which is there was no follow-on ecosystem in Latin America. There were a handful of VC firms, a lot of monopolies. And so when you raised $1 million from a venture investor, that was probably your first institutional funding and very likely your last institutional funding. And I learned something really fascinating when you lived in an ecosystem like that. You made every single penny count. And ever since working at that firm, where we had no zeros, believe it or not, a venture firm that made a dozen investments with no zeros, I believe that that can still be the case. And so I've been practicing that form of venture since. I don't believe in raising series and series of venture on rounds. I'm probably the only guy here on stage who will say that. I think VCs are not the kind of people you should be raising money from if you can avoid it. Most of you start a company to change the world and to not have a boss. A VC is a boss. VCs take board seats. They have protected provisions. They tell you how to run your business. I run a seed stage fund called Entrepreneurs Roundtable Accelerator. We write $40,000 checks into early stage companies and we take common stock. With that, we try to align ourselves with you and we try to help you figure out the best way to maximize your return and your vision. A handful of companies can become large, and a handful of companies can and should go on to raise large amounts of funding. But by and large, 99.9% of companies should raise the bare minimum and get the profitability, leaving you with as much of the company as you can possibly own. And I believe that works. I believe it's the best way for entrepreneurs to make a lot of money. And I believe there's a huge opportunity for a lot of companies to be built. Let's see, I've been involved in a variety of different deals, probably 70 to 80 since the beginning of my career. A couple IPOs. I focus primarily on enterprise software, infrastructure software, but I've been involved in companies like Tasty Delight, which we acquired to roll out into a national franchise, now 250 locations nationwide. Companies like Naked Juice, beverage company, to Boingo Wireless or Bag Bar or Steel, or a variety of other businesses throughout the US. I think globalization's happening. So for a lot of the non-New York companies here, feel free to talk to me about how I view coming to New York, building a headquarters here in New York, leaving R&D in other markets, and capitalizing on what's best overseas and also what's best in New York. Because I do think you can build companies thanks to Skype and LinkedIn on a global basis. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Charlie.